Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, where we will be discussing how to simplify the creation and collection of your sampling strategy. We are thrilled to have you join us today for this informative session presented by VineView. My name is Mindy DeRohan, and I am the Manager of Membership and Communication here at the California Association of Wine Grape Growers. During this webinar, our expert presenters from VineView will share their knowledge, expertise, and cutting-edge technology to demonstrate how to create sampling plans that pinpoint sampling locations, giving an accurate representation of field conditions. Presenting today from VineView will be Raul Pina, Vice President of Global Sales, Melissa Strayed, Executive Vice President of Business Development, and Max Turner, Product Manager. Now let's get started with today's webinar. I encourage you to submit any questions that you may have in the questions box as we go. Questions will be answered either live on the dashboard, or we will host a Q&A session at the conclusion of the webinar. And lastly, before we dive in, this webinar is being recorded, and I will send out a link with the webinar recording once it has been processed this afternoon. And now I will turn the presentation over to Raul.
Great, thank you, Mindy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're going to be covering quite a bit of information, but in a short period of time, so I hope you'll find this time useful. We also want to make sure that we express to you the appreciation we have for you as customers and potential customers. We want to make sure that we share with you the successes that we've had in serving the needs of our wine growing community in California for the past 22 years. Specifically in those 22 years, we learned a great deal from you. And as we go forward, we try to find solutions to those very problems that you've identified. Today's discussion is going to be specifically about just that, the idea of how we can simplify the process of sampling. So we wanted to share with you our expertise in that regard. To that end, we have been joined by two of my colleagues. Max Turner is our lead product manager in our headquarters location. And we are also joined by Melissa Strayed, who's the EVP of Business Development, also one of the co-founders of our company 22 years ago. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Max, if you can get us started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Raul. Let me get started here. All right, so quick overview. So as we know, sampling is a really important input in predicting common management practices such as yield or understanding quality. These can have downstream implications on, budgeting your operational costs or even predicting harvest. So it's really important that we get a representative sample so that we're feeding these models really good data to make these critical management decisions later on. And when I'm talking about a representative sample, what I'm meaning is that we're getting a holistic view of your field of all the different types of vines. So, young vines, strong vines, weak vines, disease pressure. We want to make sure that we're capturing everything in that representative sample to get the best quality data. Of course, there's going to be some issues with getting a representative sample. There's a couple downsides, mainly that it can be pretty time consuming. So there's oftentimes, additional labor costs involved there, more people out in the field for a longer period of time. And it also can be really difficult to track the progress, especially if you have a big organization that spans, a large geographic area. You have probably a lot of people out there sampling, doing a lot of different things. So you're wondering when they're sampling, what they're sampling for, how long they're sampling, what time, who's doing it. So a bunch of different variables. And then finally, there can be a lack of understanding of that variation in the field by people sampling. Bigger variation in the field can change, month over month, year over year. So it's really important to kind of keep, your finger on the pulse of what's happening in your vineyard if you are trying to collect that representative sample. So in the past, VineView has provided kind of like one piece of the puzzle to creating, a good representative sampling plan, and that we provide aerial vigor maps. So these vigor maps, you're probably familiar with this, but they show the vigor variation in a spatial view of the field. So it gives our growers like a good understanding of what's going on. And in fact, some of our growers that work with VineView have taken it upon themselves in the past to create sampling strategies based on these vigor zones or on this vigor data. So they would, make sure they're adding samples to the high zones, to the low zones, to the kind of average zones. So they're getting the representative sample of their field. However, like Natalie and Raul were saying, we do want to take this a step further and kind of, take the data, the foundational data that we have, and finish the entire process and get you a really good sampling plan strategy, implemented along with the collection aspect. So this year we're launching a VineView Smart Sampling, and we're adding 2 new products in addition to our aerial data. A web-based sampling creator where we can go in, create all the sampling plans, have them all stored there, giving you that platform. And then also a mobile app, a mobile-based collector app. So, we can create the sampling plans, but how do we get the data and how do we wrap it back up? And this is where this mobile app comes in. So we're going to take a look at these 2 things in particular during this webinar and kind of go through, a sample demo of a property and see how this can all work. So how are we helping you here? Well, we are going to help you with our data to get you those representative samples. So launching those target samples out so that they're going to accurately reflect your field and crop conditions. And we can do it with a reduced number of samples. So you're not having to throw a million samples out into the field. We're going to smartly place these samples so that you're going to get that, the most accurate representation of field conditions. Of course, this is all based on VineView data. As Raul was saying, we have 22 years backed of scientific rigor. We've been fine-tuning this product for years, so you can rest assured that this is, the best quality data to make these critical decisions. We're going to provide you the platform to implement these sampling strategies. So we're assuming that you're going to have a lot of sampling plans, different types of samplings over the year. We're providing that platform and giving you that recurring data year over year, so you can keep feeding the beast, keep feeding this information and getting those data pieces as you go through the growing season. Of course, we're going to help with the tracking aspect that I was talking about earlier. We're assuming that, maybe you have, again, the big organization, you could have somebody in Napa that's like creating the sampling plan, and then 2 minutes later, you have a team of 6 people down in Paso that can go out to the field, collect the samples, ship the data back up to the person in Napa, and they can sit there and do the, post data analysis. So we want to have everybody involved, and that leads to the point of the cross-functional aspect. So everybody in your organization can contribute to getting these sampling plans off the ground, whether it's the collection or the creation. Everybody has access, should have access to these tools. So let's take more of a look at the sampling plan creator. Like I was saying, there's two different products we're launching right now. The first one, again, is the creator tool, where you actually go in and you go through our walkthrough to create the sampling plans. This year, we're allowing, unlimited amount of sampling plans. You can have different types of statistical methods involved for each, depending on, what you're sampling for. And everything is super customizable. So, templates, specific internal protocols that you're trying to follow. We're trying to fit we're trying to fit your own internal protocols into the VineView app here. So it's very customizable. We're also giving you multiple options to actually collect the data. So like I was saying, we do have the option to use our collector app that we'll go into later. But we also have some more traditional methods like, a print off map or even an Excel spreadsheet that allows, depending on what your internal practices are, to take that approach instead. So let's take a look at the actual walkthrough here. Let me move this over. All right, so you're probably familiar with this type of screen. This is just showing, general PureVine data. So we are adding the sampling plans, just top right-hand corner, scroll down, you'll see a sampling plan option over here, and then click that. So now we're in the sampling plan landing page. This is where, if you have sampling plans created, they'll all be listed here. This person, however, they have not created any sampling plans yet. So let's go in and change that by creating a new one. So this will launch a little modal, kind of like a walkthrough. There's 6 steps into creating a sampling plan. The first one, pretty straightforward. Let's just name this. Let's go CAWG demo. Moving on, form templates. So this is where I was talking about, we can, have it very customizable. So think of this as like a sampling type of template. So think maturity sampling, yield sampling, tissue sampling. And then, and for this example, I actually have maturity and yield already loaded up. Think of these as forms with different types of information that you need collected in each of the forms. So let's take a look at maturity sampling to see what I'm talking about. So in this example for maturity, I have pH and Brix loaded as a really simple, template for maturity sampling. But like I was saying, this is super, super customized. We can add whatever we want here. If we want to add, additional information, you can add as much as you want. Likewise for yield estimation, in this example, we have cluster count and cluster weight. But let's say we wanted to add cluster position. Oops, spelled that wrong. We can add that too. We can also help you set these up. This is probably the most involved step of the process. So if you reach out to VineView, we can help kind of set these templates up later on for quick data collection in the field. This right here, this is just kind of like instructions for the people that are actually going to be collecting the data. You'll see how this comes into play a little later on, but this is mainly just a communication tool. It doesn't have to be used. In this example, let's just remind them to crush the grapes for the maturity sampling. Moving on to the block selection, this is nothing new here. Behaves in a similar way to the VineView app. You can select, all the blocks for the property, a subset of the blocks, whatever for your sampling plan. Let's choose all 3 for this example and move on. All right, now that we're on to the statistical method page. So we're going to have 4 different types of methods for actually placing the samples. So kind of, taking the data in and choosing where the sample should be placed for this season. All of them have, some pros and cons depending on what you're sampling for. So I think I'll just walk through these and give a brief overview and what we'd recommend for different types of sampling. So the first one is the most straightforward, simple random. This literally just takes the amount of samples you want, let's say 10 samples, and then it'll randomly distribute it in the field in just kind of like a random number generator fashion. So, this one also works, it can work with the PureVine data, but it also, we have it working outside of PureVine data in case, we have a client that's outside of California or France that isn't able to access that data type. It's recommended to use simple random in that case. Representative row. So this is an interesting method where we're actually taking each block and we're looking at the distribution of the vigor. Once we know the distribution of the vigor, we're going row by row and we're trying to find the best match of that vigor distribution to an optimal row. So we go through everything, we pick a row that best matches that vigor distribution, and we name that the representative row. Then we send samples down that row for you to go collect. So this one, it's a bit of a trade-off. It's a lot faster. So you're only sampling down 1 row at a time, meaning it would be really, really good for, sampling types where you're super crunched for time. So think maturity sampling. You're like post-veraison, you have, a million people doing a million different things, harvest is approaching, but we really want to get these samples off and we want at least, we want to have it, somewhat representative. So this would be a really good option for that because you're reducing the amount of walking. There's a bit of a trade-off. You're not going through the entire field, but you're still getting the best possible option for a representative row in that field. Next, we have the area weighted option. This will take each of your blocks and subdivide them based on VineView's EBI zones. It'll then allocate more samples to the zones that are of higher area. So we won't be assigning a bunch of samples to an area that doesn't, that is a little less significant in the grand scheme of things. You can think of this as a stratified approach. And then finally, we have the zonal variation method. So this one also takes each block and subdivides it into different vigor zones, but we do an additional step where we take each vigor zone and we calculate the variation under each. And what we're doing here is we're looking at that variation. We're taking the amount of samples that you have predetermined, let's say 10, and we're allocating more samples to the zone that has more variation. So if let's think of it this way. So we have zone A and zone B. Zone A has like, it's like crazy town. There's like high vigor plants, dead plants, low plants. There's just a lot going on. Zone B has, it's uniform. It's pretty homogeneous. All the vigor is pretty much the same. We're going to take those 10 samples and we're going to add, let's say 8 to zone A because there's a lot going on there. And we really need to get, a good representation of that zone. And then we're taking the additional 2 and throwing it to zone 2 because it's pretty homogeneous and there's a good chance we're going to capture, the variability in that field. So this is a good way to, capture a lot, the variation of the field, reducing the number of samples. But there is a bit of a trade-off in that the samples are likely to be dispersed through the field. So we recommend this one, if you have a little bit more time, let's say tissue sampling, everything's maybe going into one bucket anyways, get shipped off to the lab. This would be a really good method for that type of sampling. So there you have it. We are planning on adding more in the future, but these will be the 4 that'll be available at launch. So let's just choose zonal variation for this example, and then we'll select the Veraison flight and move on. All right, so now we're on the protocol page. This is just where we set the number of samples per block. This page is actually going to look a little bit different on launch. We're going to actually give you some quantitative values here, some numbers to show you, how much error is potentially being introduced in each block per number of samples. So think of it like we'll have like a margin of error number, for example, showing, if the margin of error is higher, maybe we should bump up the samples a bit so we get a better representation. And maybe we can even bring some samples from a field that already has good representation and kind of allocate it to that other field. So it just lets you customize a bit, kind of calibrate it based on what you're seeing. So like, I'll give you an example here. We can go 5, 15, 3, or we can just go same for all, which we're going to do in this example, and just hit 8 and then move on. And that's it. That's the walkthrough. So at this point, it's just confirming, all the information is correct. You can kind of scroll through, see where they might end up, and then hit confirm, and your sampling plan has been created. So at this point, we're back on we're on the sampling plan web app screen, the map view, and we have a couple choices here. So we have no information collected for this, and since we're maturity sampling, we're going to need Brix and pH at least. So what do we do now? I guess first of all, there's a couple options here. We could go the more, old school traditional way where we're just maybe downloading a PDF and going out into the field and collecting it with a pen or paper. That option's there with our download PDF option. So you can select the number of samples and it will quickly generate a block by block view of our samples where you can take the observations as you go through. Another way you could do this, you could take the observations and you can add it directly. You could actually add it directly to the web app here if you click on each of these and just kind of throw them in this fashion. Oops. I'll throw it up there, 21. As you can see, as you collect the samples, they, you get the little check mark feedback showing you that it's done. If you look over here, you'll see that block 1 has 1 out of 8 samples fulfilled. And we're wrapping all that data up in kind of like an easy to digest view over on this side panel where you can see for block 1, all of the samples. We can see that this one has been fulfilled. And if we have to edit that information, we can do so. So this is kind of the clunky approach, the, maybe say lower tech. We're not using the app to collect. Oh, I forgot one thing. You can also check the results here as you collect them in this table view. You can see right here, there's a lot of unfulfilled entries. That's because we didn't go out and collect. We did take that one where I said the pH is 3 and the Brix is 20. So think of this, you can kind of picture this being completely filled as the samples go on. And you have the option to download as a CSV or an Excel file. One common approach here I've been hearing is, if you're yield sampling, you're doing your cluster counts and cluster weights, you can download this as an Excel and then slot that into your, gigantic yield estimation Excel file that you might already have kind of, 5 years in the past. So we're just trying to, slot in the VineView data where it's appropriate. So that's the gist of the Creator app. So again, web-based, where you go in and actually create the sampling plans. So let's move on. Let's move on in the process and think of how we're going to collect all this data. Like I don't, the PDFs might be fine, but I actually want to go out and navigate to each location. So this is where the collector app comes in. So the collector app, again, mobile-based. It's on our VineView app, which can be found on the Apple App Store and Google Play, and it's a free download. This app will sync directly to the web creator, so they talk back and forth to each other. And we use your phone GPS navigation with a simplified interface and easy form entry to get all that information loaded in there. So in this case, it's going to be getting the bricks, getting the pH at each of these locations. And the user that created this is going to be able to see this real time, people collecting the data if somebody else is collecting this information. So there's a really good feedback loop there. We also have an offline mode available for our sampling collector. So if you have fields that are, really, really poor cellular reception, that's fine. You can, before you leave, when you're on Wi-Fi, you can download these maps, take them out with you, and collect the data and just sync it when you're back in. So this is not a live version. So this is kind of this is a video of what the collector will look like. So let's just take a look. Again, this is on mobile, so it's on the drop down there. Maybe you missed that. Drop down there, bottom right-hand corner, collector app. This will bring you into kind of a simplified interface with all of your sampling plans listed here. As you can see, the CAWG demo, which I just created, is now on this list. And we have an option to go straight to that sampling plan, or like I was saying, download this little cloud icon. We'll download it as an offline map. So let's go ahead and sample. It'll bring us up to this view here. Here's that pop-up that I was talking about before. Just a reminder to the user, to crush the grapes, I guess, for doing this maturity sampling. So let's go ahead and navigate to the first sample. So because I recorded this all the way in Nova Scotia on the east coast of Canada, I wasn't actually in this field, unfortunately. So the directional fan that's common in Google Maps or Apple Maps that helps you navigate will be available in this to assist with the navigation process. But for this example, we're able to use this button at the bottom right-hand corner that will actually navigate to the closest sample to you. So in this case, this was actually the closest sample to me on the east coast of Canada. So we just hit that, and then we're able to enter the information we had set up previously with the pH and bricks. So we'll throw that number in, hit confirm, and then that sample has been collected. And you can see the visual feedback there with the check mark. If we wanted to look at the samples on a block view, we have that available here. So here are the 3 blocks with 1 out of 8 samples collected for block 1, which we just collected. We can click on that and then take a look at all of the pending samples for that particular block, all of the complete samples. If we wanted to navigate to a specific sample, we have the option to do so with these little navigation tools here. So that brings us over to this second sample that we're going to fill out now with the information that was collected in the field. So this is just another, we'll throw in the pH and then enter the bricks. And that's done. So super simple. That's how that works. Not a ton of buttons to kind of, play around with. It's straightforward. All of that information, again, is getting fed back, to the person that's collecting this does not even have to be in the field, getting fed back there. And then, once the data is back, you can do your post analysis however you wish. So that's pretty much the gist of it. That's the brand new collector app and the creator app. You're probably wondering now, the final piece in that, the first piece was the aerial data. So when should we be collecting? When is the best time to collect that aerial data? So using the 2 examples we talked about, in short, the best time to collect the data is closest to when you're actually going to be launching that sampling campaign. So for yield, ideally, it's during that bloom period when you're starting to do those cluster counts. It's closer to that time. That is the best option if we're going to be doing yield sampling. Another option, not as good, but kind of like a backup, is to use veraison from the year prior, in the hopes that not a ton of the vigor variation has changed in that, it's almost been a year period, mind you. So definitely not, kind of like not as good as getting the bloom flight off, but that would be the secondary option for yield. Maturity sampling, again, best time is just before that campaign starts for maturity sampling. So like the week of, a few days, plus or minus. With the second best option being veraison of that year though. So let's say whenever veraison happens, end of July, early August, to get that flight off. Generally, the canopy structure isn't going to change a ton after that period. It's grown in. There might not be a ton of variation change, so it's generally safe to get it off during veraison. And that's it. That's our smart sampling. So everyone who has purchased anything VineView related in 2024 will have access to these tools mid-April. When I say anything, I mean like the Pinpoint RTK, the Pro package, irrigation package. So if anything has been purchased in 2024, you have access to it for this year only. This doesn't mean that you only have access to 2024 data. You'll have access to all of your data. You'll just have access to the tools. And that concludes the tutorial. So we'll move on to the Q&A section.
Perfect. Thanks, Max. What a great demonstration of the smart sampling app and new technology. So can you elaborate on how many zones to use for the sampling plan creator?
Yeah, generally we recommend around 3. Just it's kind of just easy to conceptualize, high, medium, and low. That's a common one. In our roadmap right now, we're actually going to include those zones in the visual that we're not seeing yet. So at that last phase in the confirmation page, you can see where the zones are to help kind of recalibrate, where you'll be sampling from.
Thank you. And are there any other questions? As a reminder, you can type them into the Q&A box and Max can answer them from there. Or afterwards, if someone's watching this and has questions, they can send an email to you, Max, or Raul, or Melissa. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And in the email that I send with the recording, I will include all 3 of your guys' email addresses also.
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent.
Okay, well, if there aren't any more questions, then we thank you guys so much for your time. And as a reminder, we sent out an email yesterday, but VineView will be hosting another webinar next week. And so I will send out the link to register for that webinar also. And I thank all of you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.